morning. My name is Jambu, Palaniappan, and I look after Uber's business in Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. I find it helpful in these settings to tell you a little bit about how Uber works, a bit of background about our company, our story, what motivates us, particularly in the lens of expansion and how we think about technology as a mechanism to change how cities work. This is a photo of our co-founders, Travis Kalanick and Garrett Camp. It's taken at the Eiffel Tower in Paris. And Travis and Garrett are serial entrepreneurs. They're always thinking about sort of the next idea and the next disruptive business. And they were in Paris, a city with a notoriously challenging taxi system, and effectively thinking about how you could simplify that experience, how you could just push a button and get a car to come to you. And that's sort of how the story of our business started. This is a sort of funny anecdote. Many people have talked about sort of the new age of job-based networking, and this is actually how Ryan Graves, who's Uber's first employee, got his job, as he responded to a tweet. And Travis sent a tweet saying, "Hey, I'm looking for someone to run this business," and Ryan responded with, "Email me." And I think that story, just over 5 years ago, is probably indicative of the path that we've chosen as a company to try and do things that sometimes are challenging, sometimes are not the most popular, but have potential to truly change the cities that we live in. For those of you not familiar with Uber, it's a fairly basic principle. It's a mobile-only app and sort of all of the mobile devices that you'd like to use it on. Once you download the app, you integrate your payment profile directly into it. So there's no need for cash in cars or worrying about how to pay for an Uber trip. You request a car, and your first screen that you see is a photo of the driver, the name of the driver, reg number of the car. So there's a degree of confidence, a lack of anonymity in the system that I think is important both for drivers and for riders. And then once you take your trip, the fare is calculated automatically, charged to the payment profile that you have on file. And most importantly, I think there's a rating system, right? And that rating system, a 5-star scale for both drivers and riders, leads to a higher degree of accountability for both parties. It allows for quality to remain high, and I think part of what makes the Uber experience in all of the cities we operate in remarkably similar. So we actually last week celebrated our sort of 5-year anniversary as a company, 5 years since the launch of our first city, which was in San Francisco, and you can see some numbers of where we are today. It's over 1 million trips per day. Last New Year's Eve, the 31st of December, we did over 2 million trips, and I think shows that when this model works, the value that customers can gain from it is relatively high and relatively needed across cities, despite the differences in how those cities operate. So this is a screenshot of an internal tool we have at Uber that helps us measure the health of our business real time in a city. And so this is a screenshot from early days in San Francisco. And each of those 4 blue lines is actually a concurrent Uber trip. And we're celebrating. We thought we had made it. We thought this is what success looked like. And this is San Francisco on a recent Monday morning. And you can see the scale that's generated in this business. And the scale is interesting because what it does is as more cars end up on the road, and these different colors are sort of different products, taxis, product we have called UberX, which is a low-cost ride-sharing product, a more premium product called Uber Black. As more cars end up on the road, what that does is it reduces the amount of time that customers wait, and that allows for customers to get cars in shorter amounts of time, and for drivers to be comparatively busier. And so what you can do is actually reduce the cost for customers because drivers are busier, and drivers still earn a comparatively higher amount of money. And that value in terms of making transportation more accessible, it's actually led to people thinking about selling their cars, using cars less, and I think that can really reshape how cities work. This is a chart of our expansion history, and the blue dots are cities in the US and the red ones are cities outside. And effectively what this shows is from the first city that we launched in San Francisco in the middle of 2010, it took us a full year to go to our second city, which was in New York. But our international expansion story is actually in a much more compressed time. There are, I think, two reasons for this. One, the interest from consumers in this service globally was significantly kind of motivated us to keep going and think about how to localize the model effectively. And secondly, you could argue that the need for a service like Uber in cities with underdeveloped transport systems, lack of alternatives, is actually higher than maybe some of the markets that we entered earlier. So in the Eastern European region, we're in 12 cities now. 9 months ago, that number was less than half, and a year ago, that number was just one city. What we've seen here, I think, is a fundamental embrace of our business and our model. I think for a variety of reasons, both along the lines of cost efficiencies that people can gain, the power of the technology platform, and the degree of interconnectedness between the cities that we operate in and some of our home markets in places like San Francisco, London as well, where people have lived, worked, and traveled and been eager for an opportunity to use Uber in this region. Localizing the product has been very important. I think that's a critical component in order to be successful. So this is a screenshot from our app in China where we've integrated Alipay. It's basically a local payment option, a local mobile wallet, into the Uber application. And I think what we found is that in order to be successful, particularly from a payment perspective, you've got to find a way to push in what models people prefer to use locally into your sort of seamless architecture. And I think that's been a theme. This is a screenshot from India, and that's one of our driver partners in Bangalore. And I think what we've learned most importantly is that payment localization particularly can take different forms, right? And so we've got tests with mobile wallets around the world. We've got integrations with credit card companies for their reward programs. We're now even testing cash products in a few cities around the world. But always continuing to innovate, not holding much sacred in terms of, this can't be disrupted, I think is a very important component to how we've been able to continue to drive. One of the fastest growing markets for Uber globally has actually been in Latin America. And when you think about sort of the combination of lack of alternatives, challenges around safety and security, and entrepreneurship opportunities for individuals in countries with some employment challenges, that combination is proved to be very successful. I think what we've also seen is there's been a drive for more women to become Uber partners. People who've historically been taxi drivers had some challenges around safety in particular, not being comfortable working at night or not knowing who the passenger they're picking up is. And so I was in Nairobi last week and a female driver partner came up to me and said, what I love about this product, she was a taxi driver before, she said, what I love about this product is that I know who the passengers are. I know who I'm picking up. I know that their payment is guaranteed. And that makes me feel so much better about working in the evening. I also like the flexibility because she had a kid and she said, I'd like to spend more time with my child, and now I can do that and plan my work around that rather than being stuck to a shift schedule. And when you think about the future of work, it's clear that flexibility, multiple options, maybe been working with multiple income streams is the model that many people are moving to, right? Even here in Romania, there's a gentleman who's an Uber driver who's trying to start his own architecture firm in Bucharest, and he drives for 2 or 3 hours every morning to help get that started and help raise some money to do that. And I think the idea that has been really interesting to see is what motivates people to work on the platform and drive on the platform is different, but the efficiency and the income that they can generate from it is pretty consistent. Safety has been an area where the power of a technology platform, I think, can change how we perceive the apps that we use, particularly as it relates to services that are offline. And when you think about digital fingerprint, the potential, I think, for step function innovation is really significant. So this is a feature we have called Share My ETA, which is effectively a way for someone to share their Uber trip real time with a friend, a family member, or loved one. So where am I going? How long is it going to take me to get there? Who's my driver? And send that in a web link over SMS to anyone else. And that, I think, has incredibly powerful implications in terms of confidence and consumer safety. And we've been very fortunate as a business to see very strong growth as it relates to those innovations and as it relates to that footprint expansion. But I think what's potentially more important is in less than a year in our cities in this region, we've built a product that I think is very robust and with a high degree of consumer confidence. And so here in Romania, in Bucharest, the ETA, or estimated time for a car to arrive, is just over 6 minutes, and that's in a city with definitely some challenges in the traffic department. So imagine a world where that only decreases. And what we're seeing is that more and more drivers are actually coming to join the Uber platform, making a better use of the cars that are already in the city and are already in the area. And there are a couple of reasons for that, right? One is customers are starting to use the product more. So when we start out, it tends to be people using Uber to go out in the evenings on a weekend or maybe travel to the airport. And now the usage per customer per week is increasing. It's increasing to business travel during the day. It's increasing to trips to the supermarket. And that is, I think, part of how our business kind of gets embedded into the culture of a city. The drivers go through a screening process up front. They go through background checks. They're rated on every trip, and then required to have the appropriate licensures and insurance. And this is a chart, an axis-less one, albeit, but a chart of our supply growth in Bucharest, and effectively over 25x growth over the last 6 months, partially because of that opportunity for flexible earnings and additional income for these drivers. There's also, I think, a lot of value to cities in the platform. So whereas historically there has not been a great way to predict where and when customers are likely to request a car or need a car, now, because of the power of the platform, we can push drivers to the highest volume areas and actually incentivize them to move closer to where their customers are likely to be. And that's real time in the mobile app that the drivers carry. And the implications of that are pretty powerful. In Seattle, the drink driving rate dropped 10% after Uber was introduced, and in Chicago, the crime in taxis reduced 20% after Uber began working with taxis. So this is maybe a familiar sight, right? This is a reality of a lot of our lives. The amount of time that we spend in inefficient traffic, wasting time, cars in general are incredibly inefficient resources. If you think about it, the estimate is somewhere around 95% of the time your car sits idle. It sits parked, either at your house, your office, or in situations like this. Somewhere between 14 and 15% of most cities is taken up by parking. And so we've basically taken this kind of necessary evil and put it in the center of the places that we live. I'll play a quick video here. The partnership we ran with Renault's electric car division. like the music there. That was good. So that's all great, but what's the vision of this, right? What does this actually mean for you and for me in the cities we live in? I think our ultimate ambition is a simple one. It's to reduce the number of cars necessary to make cities like Cluj work, right? And ultimately, the way we've chosen to approach that is a product called Uber Pool. And this is something that's now live in San Francisco, New York, a few other places, and Paris as well. Effectively, what Uber Pool is a very simple idea. It's instead of everybody here leaving and getting in their own car or their own Uber, you actually share those cars. And so imagine digitally being able to match people based on where their destination is, and saying instead of taking one Uber vehicle, you can take one Uber vehicle for 4 people rather than just one. And so what this is it's picking up the first passenger, but before dropping them off, picking up an additional passenger. And that continuing in perpetuity. So what you see is with a traditional UberX or sort of low-cost Uber vehicle, the number of trips that vehicle can do per day is 7 times greater than just a personal car. And so there's some efficiency there. When you add Uber Pool to that sort of comparison, that efficiency increases to 13 times more efficient. So you can go from moving basically 5.5 people a day to 72 people per day. What makes it more compelling is Uber Pool can actually be cheaper in most cases than owning a car when you factor in lease payments, parking, petrol, insurance, maintenance. You can actually drive twice a day on Uber Pool and save money. So it's cheaper, faster, and from that video as well, better for the environment. And so what that means is effectively you can do the same number of trips, in this case it's 5.6 million trips. You can do that with much fewer cars needed in order to actually achieve that goal. And you can reduce 500,000 cars in a city that size with just those two things, with this Uber Pool product and many more driver partners. And I think that's compelling because it can actually help change the way you live in a city. Imagine the city that you live in, cities that you love without traffic or without congestion, and create economic opportunity as well for those individuals that are looking for it. It means less congestion, it means fewer emissions, it means less time in traffic and more jobs. So I'll conclude with this. This is actually a shot of Cluj, and these are people who have actually tried to download and use the Uber app here. And so one of the questions I got was, when are you guys coming here? And I guess the answer is soon. But we're certainly appreciative of the support. I think where we've seen huge potential is cities like this one, where the excitement and interest in using our product before we've even come here has been high. So I appreciate you having me. Hope you enjoyed the story, and hope to see you again soon. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Just stay with us one more second.
Oh, okay.
So we'll still take one question from the audience. And I'd had tons of questions to you,
Sure.
but I'll let somebody from the audience ask. So we have a question directly in front of there, if we can get a microphone there. Or you can just ask out loud and we'll repeat it. I know we have a microphone coming. We'll not let you go that fast.
Yeah, no worries.
So.
Hello. My question is, how have you dealt with the pushback from the authorities? Because in Romania, at the beginning of May, a law has been passed where they outlaw driving of passengers without a proper authorization, whatever that means. So how?
Yeah, I think the nature of this business generally, right, is everything that is sort of foundational about what we do is based on a framework that, if you think about it, 10 years ago, right, we didn't all have these incredibly powerful phones in our pocket. And the regulatory sort of environment that exists, particularly around transport, is oftentimes 40, 50, 60 years old. And so I think what we found is that there is clearly an interest in some of the things that I talked about there, right? There's clearly an interest in how can we make cities more efficient? How can we create jobs? But there's often a lack of understanding of how Uber works. And our model is clearly about cost efficiencies. It's about making the cars on the road more efficient. I think the situation you mentioned here in Romania, I think is a good example of we operate. It's important to know, right, that Uber isn't a taxi service. That's not who we are. It's a technology platform, and so I think there are rules that oftentimes govern the taxi industry that are misinterpreted, not necessarily directly applied to our business. So I think here my takeaway is that governments are starting to understand broadly that this is sort of the future, right? And in the U.S., for example, 25 states have passed ride-sharing bills that actually allow for, that have recognized and brought in a framework around this. So Uber generally is a pro-regulation company. We want to be regulated, and oftentimes it's about just showing how this new model that sometimes is difficult for people to get their heads around actually fits into the regulatory framework.
Okay. So one closing question from my side as well. So we have to take one more question from the audience because there seems to be high demand. So, but while we get the microphone over there, do you still personally own a car?
No, I don't even have a house.
How much?
It's a little bit.
So you use like Uber and Airbnb? That's how it
right.
works?
Yeah. No, to be honest with you, I do. And yeah.
So how much money do you spend a month on Uber?
I'll give you a funny story. Right. Yesterday, we don't have Uber here, so I took a taxi from the airport, and I got out of the car and I forgot to pay because I'm just not used to paying, right? And so, don't worry, I sorted it out. Sometimes it
it's
happens.
okay if you get in jail in Cluj. We have you much more support for the local entrepreneurs. So it's, we'll like you to be in jail in Cluj. We'll make your visiting time like entrepreneur consulting time. Okay, so the last question up front here, if we can get the microphone there, and then we'll go on with the next panel. And I think the other people can get you in the hall later on for questions.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I think if we'll get Jambu out there, you can ask him personally as well.
It's a very nice product. I'm curious about Uber Pool, because how do you fit that in your business plan? Because that means that you have less customers. Like the taxi, they are doing one customer per time. You're trying to get the traffic less, but at the same time you're getting less money because you're just. So how does that fit in the business plan in the long run?
Yeah. I think there is a very high degree of price elasticity in this business. And so with Uber Pool, in that instance of 4 passengers sharing one car, what that actually means is the cost of the trip for each passenger is 1/4 of the price, right? And so when you start to get into a world where you can get anywhere in the city for 1/4 the Uber minimum fare, right? And so, in Paris, that's something like, I think it's like €2. That becomes pretty compelling in terms of how much more frequently you want to use the product, maybe how long you use the product for, maybe for longer trips or shorter trips, how sort of viral the product gets. And so I think we're big believers in making the cost of transportation as accessible as possible, allowing people to use services like Uber as frequently as possible. And I think if we do that, then I think the customer piece will certainly compensate from a business model perspective for that. I think the other piece is it's got to be interesting for the drivers, right? If the economics don't work for the drivers, then none of this works.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Much appreciated.